Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Stitching Tales, a podcast about sewing and also what it's like running a sewing business. And my name is Johanna Lundström. I am the author of several sewing books, and I also create sewing patterns and do YouTube videos and lots of other helpful sewing content under the brand The Last Stitch.
And my name is Malena, and I work as a freelance pattern maker, and I also am the creator behind Hazelhen Patterns.
And in today's episode, we're going to continue on a topic that we started in the last episode. Or basically, it's been an ongoing series for a while now. We talked about sewing trousers or sewing pants, depending on where in the world you're living. And what we talked about in the last episode was the fact that, sewing pants, especially woven pants, dressy pants, can be quite intimidating, right, Malena? Why do we find it a bit of a struggle to sew pants, would you say?
Yeah, I think first, the fabric, that it's not so stretchy if it doesn't have any like elastan or spandex in it. So the fit is more crucial to get right. And also, I think the zipper is... People are afraid of zippers, don't you think? Or at least I am.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of people are afraid of zippers. I'm actually not one of them, and that's why I think you should listen to this episode, because we're definitely going to talk about how to sew zipper. Now, this is an audio podcast, obviously, but we also have a video version that you can check out, and we will also link to a lot of helpful contents in this. If you find that, it's very difficult to visualize all the things that we are talking about in this episode, because it's a little bit hard to talk about sewing and not showing. But don't worry, we will have you covered with lots of helpful tutorials to help you with all the things. And in the previous episode, if you haven't listened to it, we talked about fitting, obviously, and we talked about fabric choices and also understanding how to properly gauge where the waist is and how that affects the measurements and everything like that. So there's a lot of things just going on before you even start sewing the pants. But we thought we should dedicate this episode to talk about the actual sewing process. We talk about woven pants here, and if you haven't, you can also go back and listen to. We did a series about how to sew knit pants as well, where we talk more about that, because it definitely differs. As you say, Malena, we have the zippers and we have the pockets, and it's a lot of other stuff that can be a little bit tricky. And when we are talking mostly about dress pants here, so we usually have to deal with darts, and we might need deal with back pockets, welt pockets, for instance. We have front pockets, and of course the dreaded zippers. And we also have the waistband, again, another challenging point. But I think we should start off talking about why it's so important to start with the smaller details, right, Malena? So before we tackle sewing the legs of everything, why is it important, would you say, that you start with things like the darts and pockets and things like that?
Well, it's just easier to sew when you have not sewn all the pieces together. So it's just easier to work with the pattern piece, like fabric pieces, with your sewing machine, because you don't have so much to take care of, basically. If you sew the darts on the back leg, for example, before you have sewed anything together, then it's just that one back leg that you need to handle with your sewing machine. So it's just easier. But I would say that I do recommend, start with the details, as I said, because it's easier to sew. But again, here is it's not a mandatory thing. When I grew up, when we had sewing in school, when I was 14, 15, something, my teacher had a little bit different approach to it. We didn't do so many toils and tests to try out the fit from the beginning. We actually did sew the actual sample basically right away, but then we did a lot of fitting along the way. And if you do it more in that process, then it actually might be better to wait with some details, because then you can actually see the placement, you can adjust the placement of the pockets. If you are trying on the the trousers without any details, you can actually see and adjust the placement of the details. But yeah, it's a lot more difficult to actually sew it when you have sewn all the pieces together. So it's a little bit trickier in that sense. But then again, you fit along as you go, so we got really nice end results, like with the fitting, the placement, pockets, and everything. So it's not like you have to do it one way or the other. It's just different approaches, different pros and cons. But what I do recommend, if you start with sewing all the details, you should have made a toile before, and you don't need to sew the pockets or anything like that then, but just draw it out so you see that the placement is nicely placed on your body. So that's just a good thing to have in mind, that just so you know that you are placing things in the right placement for you.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because it's definitely tricky to fit as you go if you're following the method that we talked about. Start with the details, and when we talk about details, of course, it's the darts, and maybe you realize that the pants would be better, with smaller darts or wider darts, for instance, and then maybe you realize that the front crotch area looks a little bit wonky, and then you already install the zippers. So again, you have problems. And as Malena says, if you do a toile first, or a sloper, or a fitting, like a fitting garment, it's good. You don't even have to install the zippers, right? You just sew up to the seam in the front crotch where the zipper should be inserted, and then you just pull the pants on, and just pin it into place on your body. So actually, it's a very quick thing. I mean, pants are time consuming and tricky to sew, but sewing a pants toile is actually really quick. Actually, I mean, it's basically only the darts. Otherwise, it's just the side seams and the crotch seams. I mean, you can whip it out in 30 minutes, I would say.
Yeah,
if it's not any other.
Really, it's a quick sew, so definitely recommend to do that.
And it's the same with, for instance, some pants have front pleats, and again, those are also great to use for adjustment, because sometimes you realize when you fit it on that maybe it's a little bit too wide or a bit too tight at the front. So that's a really good way of being able to adjust the width of the pants with just either increasing or decreasing the pleats. So again, as you say, Malena, the fit as you go method definitely has its benefits in this instance as well, and because otherwise you would obviously also do the pleats before, but yeah, for me personally, I definitely am a fan of doing the details first, because it's the access, right? Because if you have like a free flat piece, for instance the back piece, especially if you darts, they are not tricky, I think, to sew, but when you start to deal with like back pockets, I find that it's much easier to have like full access of a free unsewn back piece in order to get the control. And also with pressing as well, as we talk about a lot, which
I forgot to say pressing again. Like it's so much easier to do the pressing. And also if you do a mistake or something on a detail on the back pockets, for example, if you have welt back pockets, which are a little bit more complicated, and if you ruin it, like, you have not gone so far in the process, so it's pretty easy to just cut out those pieces again if you have some extra fabric. So yeah, that's a huge pros to actually do this method. What are your favorite details to start with? What are your jump starter, kickstarter?
I think I usually start, for instance, I find darts not difficult to sew. Sometimes I do. Usually, most pants that I sew usually have back darts, but not front darts. I usually do the back darts first, and if you want to add like back pockets or welt pockets, you definitely need to sew the darts first. Sometimes the pockets are actually cut through the darts, so you need to sew the darts first. So for me, I like to sew the dart because I'm pretty good at sewing darts. You can follow my tutorials on my blog for tricks how to do that. But I think I I honestly think that I make darts that can definitely rival good ready to wear, because sometimes I see darts in shops and I'm like, I could do that better. But that's a side note. This is a safe space for like grandiose self-image when it comes to sewing.
No, but absolutely. And here's the when garments are in the store, like those ready-to-wear garments, like speed is of the essence for making them cheap. So they are rushing it when they are sewing it. And when you sew it yourself, you can take your time, and usually that is what's gonna elevate your garment, because you have the time on your side. What are your best tricks and tips when sewing darts?
Yeah, so I mean the most common problem with the darts, and what we will see a lot of ready to wear as well, is that at the tip of the dart, the tip, not the opening, but the tip. I can't speak English now. That you get a little bit of a dimple because the stitch doesn't end exactly where the fabric ends, and you can see that in ready to wear, and you will definitely experience this yourself. So my preferred method for doing darts, and I also show this on my blog, thelaststitch.com. You can see several different methods there I use for darts, but a couple of things that I find is important is that you so my preferred method is, of course, I start sewing at the wide part and then I stitch stitch, and then when I have about 1.5 centimeters until I reach the end of the dart, the tip of the dart, then I reduce the stitch length. So I do use a fairly straight, short stitch length, and then I really sew very slowly, and I sew the final stitch, because if you do a shorter stitch length, you will avoid the dimples as well, because there will be less gap. So for that last, like I think it's a 5/8 inch. Yeah, I stitch so that it just touches the edge, and then so the final stitch is just end. The needle should like pierce into that folded part, like just catching a slight thread of the fabric. And if you're able to do that, and also having a magnifying lamp, which I have, especially when you get a little bit older, I'm wearing my glasses, and if you're watching the video version, we both are. It's a little bit tricky. So you have, that's like the trick. And you should not backstitch the dart, because the shorter stitch length is a key component here. And then you just lift up the needle and remove the fabric, and then you keep about 10 centimeters of thread, a thread tail, which is about 4 inches. So instead of backstitching, what I do to secure is that I tie those threads into a knot, a double knot preferably. So the combination of that double knot with the smaller stitch length will provide no bulk, because if you backstitch, you risk of, the stitch might come outside, and then you will have an uneven dart. So I think that's the number one trick, to do this very methodically, really avoiding bulk and sewing super close to the edge. And then I just snip the thread ends, and the dart is secure. So that's my first basic tip for that. Do you have any suggestions for the sewing process for darts, Malena?
Yeah, and I think we mentioned this in our book Fit for Knits, right? That when you sew a dart, I mean, on all patterns, the dart is like straight, the legs are straight, but when you actually come to the tip, the end point, I always recommend that you sew it a little bit rounded, so you almost sew the last half centimeter slightly more parallel to the fabric folded edge. So we get a more rounded tip. That will also help to avoid that little dimple, what do you say, like a bubble?
A dimple, bubble,
that is also a really good way of sewing. If you do the opposite, like you almost turn when you are sewing the dart and turn more to the folded leg, then that will actually increase the dimple effect. So definitely also slightly curve the
curve out, yeah,
inseam.
exactly, because you want that smooth shape. That's a really good tip as well. Yeah, and that really, it comes with practice, and it's detailed sewing for sure. So don't be too hard on yourself if you are struggling. I mean, the more you do the darts, the easier it's gonna get. And a semi like breakthrough that I had recently was to use for pressing down the dart, because when you're sewing back darts, we're talking about that you press them towards the mid back or the crotch seam. And in my sewing book, the Reader's Digest, I have this great, I highly recommend that book, the Reader's Digest Sewing, Complete Guide to Sewing, I think it's called. It's one of those mammoth detailed classic sewing books. They recommend that you use a tailor's ham. And tailor's ham, if you're not familiar with it, is a rounded pressing tool that is traditionally used, I think, to press sleeves on tailored garments. And it's rounded and it's filled with shredded wood. What's it called? I don't know the word, but you know what I mean. And because that roundness is extremely helpful, I find, for really flatten out that and get rid of that dimple and get a really nice pressing. So I've adapted using that, and I find that has also like really elevated. I don't know exactly what works so well, but I think it's again the rounded shape, because if you put the dart flat on the iron board, it's a little bit more difficult to shape it properly. And so that's
but this is why steam, especially also when you press and pressing in general, is so important, because you actually also shape you mold the fabric, and if you have then a round surface, because the tailor's ham is rounded, then the fabric gets molded around something that is round. So it is going to help a lot, and especially if you have wool fabric, that one is also it's gonna be so much easier to actually shape, have a nice rounded shape, compared to if you have something that is 100% cotton. So working with wool and steam is just, it's a perfect combination.
Yeah, I love sewing with wool, and we talked about that in a previous episode as well. That's my favorite fabric to use for sewing pants, because you get so nice pressing. It's very easy to control. It's very easy to shape. As you say, with steam, you can really sculpt wool, I think, in a way that you can't really do with other type of materials. So yeah, wool is definitely a wonderful fabric to work with, and that's also one of the reasons why those beautiful tailored suits are made in wool, because it's also like a sculpture. Yeah,
100%. Yeah.
So,
and really, if you sew your own trousers, take your time and do this and try this out. Like these small, I mean, it's not complicated techniques at all. Like it is really easy to do when you just, maybe you need to try it on a scrap piece of fabric or something. But really try out this, because this is a thing that will elevate your sewing and will have such a nice end result to your garment. So slow down, take your time, and it will be shown on your garments.
Yeah, very good points. And I think that's why trousers is a good way of practicing your sewing skills. Like there are so many things into one when you do that. And so yeah, that was darts. That's usually what I start with. And the reason why I start with the darts is because I feel pretty comfortable about that. Sometimes there is a saying like, eat the frog, and you should do the tricky bits first. Like, I think it's more of a time management saying. I learned it in therapy, actually.
I never heard that. Eat the frog.
Eat the frog, yeah. Do the unpleasant task before.
Oh, okay. No, okay.
Yeah. Because for most people, I guess, eating a frog is an unpleasant experience. And then when you've done that, you will kind of free up your mind to do other things. And I agree with that statement, but I also think that sometimes it's good to do a bit of a confident booster. And if there's one, so my advice here, if you are a little bit scared of sewing pants, is to maybe pick one of the things that you feel most comfortable first, just to get going and get that little bit of a confidence boost. So that's why I do the darts first. And if there's welt pockets on the back, that's definitely the frog. And that's too complicated process to explain here, but I again definitely strongly recommend, if you don't have one, get one of those really like thorough old style sewing books, because they really show everything you need to know about sewing welt pockets. And I also have a different method that I find a little bit easier, that I show it for making bound buttonholes, but you can also use it for welt pockets. But yeah, that's definitely, and if your pattern doesn't come with great sewing instruction, I mean, get one of those sewing books, because it is, I wouldn't say it's difficult, but you have to be extremely precise. So what is your take on welt pockets? Is it something you enjoy doing, or Malena?
I'm just like, ooh, have I ever like done a welt pocket? I mean, in school I did, but I don't think I have done one since then, to be honest. I mean, I do patterns for it a lot, but I haven't actually sewn a welt pocket in forever. Just something that I'm thinking about now, like if you are gonna do it, it's really like down to the millimeter, like not even a millimeter, like smaller than that. Like it's so, you need to be so precise to avoid any like drag lines or dimples or anything. So really shorten your stitch lengths, same advice as on the dart, because then it is so much easier to be precise. Slow down when you sew, and dare to actually cut right to those corners, because otherwise if you leave 2 millimeters, it's gonna be drag lines then. So really, and also if you have like shorter stitch length, it will prevent it from like breaking or anything when you wear it. So don't be afraid of really cutting to the seam edge.
Yeah, because I'm holding up a welt pocket here for ready-to-wear pants. In case if you're watching the video version and don't know what a welt pocket is, it's usually 1 or 2 pieces of fabric straps that is used for the back pockets. It can also use for bound buttonholes and other details. And as you can see, if you're watching the video version, it's a rectangular opening, so you have to actually cut open the fabric by slashing it. And first you slash a straight line, and then you slash into the corners, all 4 corners of the rectangular that you've sewn. And again, this is so tricky, but you bring up a really good point, and you have to be, as Malena says, you have to cut into the exact corner. And sometimes I prefer not to use scissor, but one of those Sharpie knife. I don't know what they call in English, but like you slice it, because I find that if I use a knife and then I start from the stitch corner and then slash out towards the mid line there, because you have to cut all 4 corners like a diagonal line onto that slash. I find that easy, because sometimes scissors, it's a little bit tricky to get, to the exact point, because it's like a millimeter off in one corner, and the end result is not going to look great. So, I mean, if you are scared of welt pockets, we totally sympathize with you. As Malena says, maybe you haven't sewn welt pockets because you haven't had to in years. So, and I totally understand it. Not my favorite thing to sew, because you have to slash into your precious fabric.
Yeah. And also one recommendation, you always use, like, I'm asking a little bit now while I give this tip, you always use fusing, right? Like as a reinforcement on the fabric, both on the actual welt, like the pocket piece, and also on the actual back leg part as well, right?
Yeah, so I'm holding up here, now I'm holding up a ready-to-wear pants here from Uniqlo. You can see here, as you can see if you're watching the video version now, the inside has a strip of fusible, so you add that before you stitch that rectangle that we talked about that you need to shred open. So that will also give you some assurance that you won't be, how shall I say, it's the risk, minimize the risk of you slipping or sliding, because the fabric is stabilized before you do this. And it's again, fusible is your friends when sewing pants, so don't skip on it. Just use good quality and lightweight fusible. Don't go for the heavy stuff, just lightweight, because you just need a stability. And you do that, and as Malena says, you also should fuse the actual like welt, or passepoil, I think sometimes we call it, maybe here in Sweden. These two, because if you have stable fabric, it's just so much easier to work with. Also, especially if you say you're doing welt pockets on a pair of pants that has some lycra in it as well, it's even more important that you really make sure that it's stable. And then, of course, you have to
from the fabric, because when you cut them open, you don't overlock those like open cuts, right? Because that will add bulk. And then if you have used fusible, that will also help the fabric from unravel. So like loose threads coming out. So yeah, definitely don't skip the fusing.
Yeah, very, very good. So again, I mean, practice, and if you feel a little bit unsure, this is an awesome project to do a couple of sample testing to get the knack of it, right? I mean,
do sample of it. Like, don't try it on your fancy fabric.
No.
Use some scrap fabric, preferably if you have leftover fabric from the actual fabric. So then you will really get the experience in your hands when you try it out. Yeah, definitely. So don't be scared of welt pocket. I mean, be a little bit scared. Have respect. Have a good amount of respect for understanding that this is not a beginner technique that you can just wing it. You have to try, practice, and do your proper research and use really solid instructions, because this is not something that I think you should dive into without some type of practice beforehand. So yeah, I definitely, on my to-do list maybe in the future is to do, because I have some instructions, as I said, for making a bound buttonhole, but that's like two welt. I don't know if it's welt, but it's two strips of. But maybe in the future, I should definitely do it on my next time I do sew a pair of pants. I will definitely add welt pockets and with a single strip that I'm holding up right here, so I can do a tutorial, because I definitely think that this is an area that we are not alone in struggling with. So maybe if I can help out someone to show. But yeah, I still find this a little bit tricky to get those 90 degrees sharp corners, to be honest. I mean, I think I've never been like 100% happy with any welt pocket. I always see that little bit of bump. But that's the side of home sewing as well, so we have to just embrace it. Yeah, definitely. And if you have a pair of a pattern that has welt pockets, and if it feels too scary, you can skip that step and just do a patch pocket as well. I mean, that is so much easier to sew. So you can definitely, if you have a more advanced pattern, you can definitely make it easier as well. Yeah.
And you don't need to, you can also skip the back pockets. I mean, the back pockets are usually there for style reason, for proportion, because it's nice, instead of just having a flat fabric surface with just the darts, having some type of pocket detail on the back, it just adds interest to the back side. So I would say back pockets on dress pants is more of a visual thing. And even in a lot of store-bought pants in the lower price range now has a fake or four welt back pockets. So they're not functional. There is no pocket lining, so you can't put anything into the pocket. It's just that strip, the welt, and then it's actually closed. Just because, so it's just a style thing. So you don't have to, you will never see your back anyway. So if you're like, feel free to skip the welt, any type of pockets if you just feel too intimidated. I think front pockets are also much more used and beneficial, because those are really nice to have, I think, and very functional. And I think most of us use those more than our back pockets on. I mean, jeans is different, of course, but I think in general we are more prone to use the front pockets. Would you say?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Back pockets are, I mean, you sit down, so you can't really have anything in them. And no, I think most of the time, as you say, it's just to give some. It looks so empty without it. Like it's such a big space without any details. So it's just for the visual, more appearance that you want to add some details to it.
So then we've done the back pieces. I think the most important thing there. Normally, I don't think there are ever any pleats in the back. I don't think I've seen any patterns like that anyway, so...
No, and I mean, either if you have a more dressier pants, either you usually have a dart or you have a back yoke. And the yoke is a little bit shaped. That's basically a closed dart. That's why the back yoke is more shaped compared to your leg pattern piece. So you get that nice shaping in the seam instead. So that's also a pretty easy pattern adjustment if you want to. If you don't want to have a dart, you can slash close the dart, and then you have the yoke piece, just make it a little bit more rounded. So then that's a really easy pattern adjustment to do yourself if you prefer a yoke instead of a dart.
Yeah, and that's also if you have a nice pair of pants and you want to make them into a pair of jeans instead, you can also just use that pants and then do the yoke adjustment as Malena says, and then you basically have like the only big difference between a pair of jeans and a pair of regular pants. It's just that they remove the darts. And speaking of darts, I will see if we are able to post this on this episode, but I am obsessed now with the French brand. It's a traditional brand, Champatou, and they have done a relaunch, and they have on all their pants they have this signature dart, which is so they have the regular back darts that goes from the waist down, and then they have removed even more fabric by adding darts at the back crotch seam, so they're like a triangle. So you know, when you slash a pattern, you can slash it and you can move it in different ways. So you have one dart there and then darts in the crotch seam. Have you ever drafted a pattern like that? Have you done that
like
kind
the
of
dart
darts?
is then towards the other dart, so the tip
The
are
dart,
like...
yeah, the darts are like they are in the crotch seam. So they have So and they meet, of course, when you sew them together. You know, the darts are joined in the crotch seam. So have you tried to do that? Because I was intrigued by it.
No, I've never done it. But I have now. Remember, a friend of mine have had a pair of trousers when she had those darts. I've seen it. I mean, it's just slashing, spreading. Like you can place the dart in different places. And some pants even have like 2 darts from the waist, and that's just also a good way to, if a dart is too big, it will be difficult to get like the end tip point nicely rounded, because it's just so much shape in that dart. So in that way you can spread out the dart and make 2 smaller darts instead. So playing with darts, and you don't have to have 1 big, you can have 3 small if you want. I mean, it's just a design aesthetic how you want to do. Yeah,
that's very, very, very true. And you're spreading it, because the unique pants that I'm showing here, they have the 2 darts in the back, so 2 more narrow darts. So it's just a nice way of adding more shaping. And if we are able to, we're definitely going to publish a picture of that crotch dart. So if you want to play around with darts, you have lots of options. You can do a yoke, or you can add a second dart, and I will definitely do that once. The crotch dart, I will definitely do that one day and report back. I don't think it really adds much shaping. It's just that it looks so nice to have that some more interest in the back. So that was the darts, and now we're moving on to the front pieces, and I prefer to do the front pockets before I install the zippers, and I personally always install the zippers on the flat, but there are many ways of doing it, and there is no right or wrong. When it comes to making dress pants, we are a big proponent of perhaps not using the dress fabric for the pocket lining. Would you say, Malena, or what's your take on that?
Usually the fabric is quite a little bit thicker, since it's for trousers. So then it will just be too thick to have, because you have to have a minimum of 3 layers then at the front pocket, and usually it will just be too thick basically. And what do you say, the seam allowance or like the edge of the pocket will be showing through the fabric. So you usually use a thinner fabric for the pocket bags. You might actually also even put them on a bias to give them a little bit more stretch. And sometimes you also use a little bit more. You can have 100% cotton, thinner cotton, or use a more slippery fabric as well, because then the fabrics won't get caught in each other. And if you want to use a pop of color and just brighten up the day a little bit, highly recommend that. Playing around with colors if you're not. I don't usually wear so much color myself, but pockets there I have no problem adding on color.
Yeah, that's a great idea, and I'm going to post an image of. I have a few examples of that when I've done it for pants, and one maybe, but it's perhaps because I use so much Burda Styles patterns, but which I love for a lot of reasons. But my pet peeve with those, and I would love to hear your recommendation for solid dress pants sewing patterns, because. When we talk about pop of color, right? I guess you listeners, if you're not familiar, like, but I don't want that to show through on the actual when I'm wearing them. I just want to see the fabric. So again, I'm holding up the Uniqlo pants here, and what they do in the ready to wear, which I always have to add those pieces, because Burda style. I mean, I love generally, but they don't do that, and maybe indie sewing patterns do a better job of that. I'm sorry, I'm just not familiar with it, so this is not like a general rant, but it's a personal rant, because I really love the fit of the Burda style pants. But anyways, long rant over. You have to add facing. So if you look inside these pants here, you can see that on the front, the upper lining, there's maybe a 3 to 4 centimeters lining piece of the dress fabric or the pants fabric. So that covers both the upper and the lower pocket. So again, if you watch the video version on YouTube, the Last Stitch, Stitching Tales pod, you will also see what I'm showing here. We're definitely going to post the image on our Instagram account as well. Is that there is an extension, the facing. So, and that is stitched over the lining pieces. And if every ready-to-wear pockets have this detail, so lining. So then, of course, you can use any type of color, as Malena says, because it doesn't show through, because you add self fabric. And for some strange reason, I don't see this, so I always have to add these pieces. I'm actually going to show, in the last episode we talked about a pants, and speaking of Burda style, a pair of cigarette pants that I've done 3 versions of, and I haven't ironed them, sorry, apologies to everyone. And it's also dark fabric. But here you can see, if you're watching the video version, hope you can see Malena. So here I've added navy blue facing, both sides, and then the actual lining fabric is a brown fabric with lots of white stars on it. So yeah, definitely a contrasting lining, but you can't show, as you see now when I'm holding up the pants, you can't see it. But also this method I have a tutorial for on the blog, so I'm definitely going to add it. So Malena, because when you draft the pants for the garment industry, right, these facing pieces, they have to be included, right? I mean,
yeah. I was surprised that they didn't add them. That's strange, because then it will be showing through at the pocket opening. So I'm surprised. We always do that.
Yeah, and I think the reason is that in a lot of sewing patterns, I think they simplify the process. So for the lower pocket lining piece, they use the garment fabric for the entire piece, and then for the upper layer, which is like folded back, then they use the lining piece. Or lining type of fabric, so that's why you get around it. It doesn't simplify it, but then you don't get the benefits, as Malena says, of using a lightweight lining fabric that would also, especially if the pants are a little bit tight fitting, you don't want the the seams of the contours of the pocket showing through on your legs. I mean, it's nice to minimize that at least, and if you use like a lightweight fabric, you will definitely have to less of that showing through. So again, I might just calling out this one. So that's why it's good to get your point of view here, and if you've seen that and you have some recommendation of sewing pattern that do this the proper way, with using lining for the entire pocket and then using self fabric as facing to hide the pocket. Because I am a big proponent of this. I don't stand for any other methods.
Yeah, and I mean you do it yourself, you said it, and yeah, it's really easy to adjust the patterns. I mean, you just basically draw a line and cut, so then you have a facing part on the pocket bag. So it's really easy, like, to fix yourself. And one thing I also can, a little tip, if you have a pocket facing, usually, I mean, these pockets are cut a little bit on a bias, which makes the fabric easy, it stretches out easier. Which might be a good thing if it's a little bit tight, like you give that a little bit extra mechanical stretch, but it might also be that the fabric is stretched out then and doesn't recover so well. And to avoid that, you can use the facing in the actual fabric, and then you change the grain line on it, so the pocket opening edge on the facing is along the grain line. So then that one doesn't have any stretch, basically, or less stretch. So then the grain line will be slightly different on the pocket's openings, but since it's along the grain line on the facing, that will prevent it from being stretched out. Or do you use fusing? What do you usually do?
No, I do what you do. I just cut it. I don't cut it as slanted. I try to, as you say, because it definitely can stretch out. So when you sew that the facing piece will start to grow, right? So it end up being longer than the lining fabric piece when you start, especially when you're sewing a regular sewing machine. It's very easy to stretch out the fabric anyway. So yeah, that's a really, really good point. I mean, understanding that it doesn't really matter. So you don't have to be obsessed about, cutting everything. It's just a facing, right? So very good point there. It's amazing how much the bias, how much stretch that can add to even the most rigid type of woven fabric.
Yeah, and the problem is that it doesn't really recover while after it has been stretched out. I mean, biased dress or skirt, like, that's a different thing. But these sturdier 100% cotton fabric, it doesn't really recover when it's been stretched out. So it should be really avoided that it's being stretched out like that. Yeah.
Another tip that I find, if you want to simplify things, with the pocket lining, because a lot of sewing patterns, they have like a traditional two-piece lining, which could also be related to the fact that they often recommend that you use the dress fabric for the lower part of the pocket, and they usually have again, we're going to try to post a picture on our Stitch and Tail on Instagram because this is so hard to explain, but the one of the lining piece has an extension that goes all the way basically to the zipper. What do you call that, Malena? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know. I don't know if it probably has a specific name, but the pocket is like shaped so it doesn't go up to the waistband. It actually goes to the front crotch piece.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a way of keeping it in place. But if you look into ready to wear, and I honestly do this myself as well. So what I do these days, and I'm holding up the Uniquely pants here, is that I do the entire lining as one piece. So I just fold it in the middle and remove all those extensions, because it just saves time and fabric. Because one problem that I've found with this extension that you will see in lots of sewing patterns as well is that it doesn't lie flat. It has to scrunch up and things like that, especially if you're using very lightweight lining. So I find it's much better to control doing this. So you remove it. So you just I'm going to hold up the pants that I made myself here as well. Again, you will see here, we're going to post pictures, sorry. As you can see here again, I just folded it in the middle, and so it's just one single piece, and that's a big time saver. And you, Malena, as a professional pattern maker, what's your take on this hot topic? One piece or two piece of the pocket lining?
It's a long time since I think I definitely made some pockets with that pocket bag goes to the crotch seam, but it's not so common, I think, or at least we haven't done it so often. If you do that, now I'm trying to remember all the rules, like air quoting now. I think that the length is actually a little bit longer, just to give that extra length, so the pocket is not restraining when you are moving, and also really important that then the pocket bag has to be cut on the bias, so it gives a little bit stretch, because otherwise the pocket bag they are going to start pulling at the crotch seam, so it's not a nice thing. But yeah, if it's one pocket, if the pocket bag is made in one or two, I mean, you can have it also from the waistband and just rounded as well. Like, it doesn't have to be on the fold. Like, you can really play around and to do whatever you prefer that, and make the pocket bag bigger if you prefer that, so you can actually have your phone in your pockets.
Right, I'm holding up now a modern phone. I just bought a new one, and they're massive. I mean, they're massive. So you have to make your pockets really deep now, unless you want the phone to fall out. And you can also, so my recommendation is, measure the pocket and see if it's actually going to work for you. Of course, be aware that, especially if you're doing a pair of more slim fitted pants, if you do the pocket too long, it might affect the silhouette a little bit. So there's a give and take there. But if you have like loose fitting trousers, I mean, go wide, go deep, do you, right?
Yeah, and I mean, the easiest way to check this is that, well, just place your hand on top of the pocket bag and see how does it fit. Like, does it feel small, big, or place your phone on the pocket pattern and just to see is it enough, or do you want to increase it or not?
Yeah, and also the depth, right? Because not death, but depth. Because you have the pocket opening. We're talking now primarily about slanted pockets, not in the seam, but traditional dress slanted pockets. And sometimes this pocket opening can be quite big, but you also want that fair amount of protected depth inside the pocket, especially because you don't want them to make them too shallow, because if you put your phone and the pocket opening is as big as your phone, your precious phone is going to fall out, and your keys or whatnot. So there's also like a balance, right, between the opening and the hidden or the enclosed depth of the pocket. Sorry.
Yeah, no, definitely. You don't want depth to be the opening and the bottom of the pocket bag to be kind of same. Like, you want pretty good distance there, so it's actually like things stays in your things stays in your pocket when you have them there.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm holding up the Nikla pants here again now for you watching or listening. Yeah, so you can see here there's a pocket opening, but when I pull the hand, there's almost my entire hand has room inside. So these are very well proportioned pockets. I shout out to Uniqlo. I think it's a very nice brand to actually go in stores if you have one, because they do, even though they're not like a pricey brand, they clearly have a lot of attention to details, and so I think they're really good brands to check out for that kind of stuff. So yeah, now we talked almost 50 minutes. We haven't even reached
I think this
to the
sewing woven trousers, that could be a two-part episode, right? Because we have zippers and waistband, and those are quite important details, and differ quite a lot compared to knitted trousers. So I think we can.
We can keep talking about this
episode.
Yeah, and also we should do. Right, yeah, we're going to talk with this forever, but we actually haven't done that for a while now, and maybe if you have any questions, you should definitely email those regarding pants or anything else, because I think it's a good time now for us to do another Q&A session as well, because we also didn't have time to answer all the questions in our last Q&A. So if you do have any questions, you can email us at stitchingtalespod with 1D at gmail.com. The email address will also be in the show notes. And you can also, of course, comment on Instagram or our YouTube channel, Stitching Tales Pod, because that will also be really helpful. And also, if you have any more questions regarding pants, because as we realize now, we're going to talk a lot about that. So if we are missing any points, or we should also, or perhaps we need to do a better job explaining the stuff that we are talking about here. But don't worry, we're going to list lots of resources in this episode, and of course also go over to our Instagram account, Stitching Tales Pod, because then we're going to show the images of the stuff that we are talking about here, or if you watch the video version on YouTube. I clearly have. I love this topic because this is the kind of topic I can speak about a very specific thing, like front pockets.
No, but I love how long can you talk about the dart? It's amazing.
Yeah, because we spent like the first half of the episode just talking about darts.
But it is important things. So yeah, it's lots of tricks and tips to how to make nice garments.
Yeah, exactly, and that's why we love to do these kind of episodes, because we all have learned little tricks and to help, and so it's good to share. And of course, if you have any more suggestions and tips, please share, of course. Anyways, thank you so much for listening, and stay tuned for more episodes about sewing pants. And of course, also remember to do some, if you have any questions, it doesn't have to be about sewing pants, please drop us a note. I am Johanna Lundström.
And I am Malena Hjerpe. Bye bye.
Bye bye.